What's up, everyone? This is Harrison Barnes, and for today's conversation, we are talking to Representative Ted Deutch, Congressman from Florida's 22nd District, about all things from all the committees that he's involved in, the social justice work that's being done, and how legislation can really move this country forward. Congressman, it's always good to see you. Appreciate the time today.
Great to be with you. Thanks. I lit up the sparkly lights because it's a big deal for me to be with you.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Let's just jump in.
Sure.
In regard to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and as a member of Congress, what do you think it says about the state of things and what action should be taken?
Well, it was an awful day for me, members of Congress, our staffs, the people who work in the Capitol, but it was an especially tough day for the country. It was an assault on our democracy. The place that is, when people think about government, I think a lot of people just think of that Capitol dome, and it was literally under attack. So it was a really tough time, but the takeaway is, as hard as that day was, that was on the 6th, and 2 weeks later, everything that they tried to do, stop the democracy, stop from going forward, stop the transition power, stop the certification of the election, they lost because we inaugurated a new president, and democracy marches on. And we need to hold people accountable. We need to do a whole lot more to rein in that kind of that kind of awful mentality that we saw there. But most importantly, we need to just keep trying to do the right work to help people of our country.
Well, I'm glad, obviously, you're safe.
Thanks.
From that, and I know you'll have a big part in helping our democracy move forward. From that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think we all have a role. And the big thing for somebody like me is for all of us, but we just need to remember, I don't do the work I do for me. I do it for the people I represent. And as long as people keep that in mind, I think we're going to be okay. We gotta make sure that people understand we're looking out for them. We're not looking out for each other. That can't be the way this works.
Absolutely. You've been an outspoken supporter of social justice, and as a powerful member of Congress on senior committees, do you think Congress has done enough to address social justice, and not just talk, but actual legislation?
No, I mean, look, we went through 4 years of an administration that really decided from the very beginning, actually before President Trump was elected. I mean, the whole focus was on how to divide the country and how to pit one group against another, and demonizing immigrants and attacking different groups, and seeing those divisions only continue to grow. We have a lot of work to do, and I'm heartened that there's now a president who's committed to it. And the things that President Biden has done just at the beginning of his presidency to address racial justice and issues of equity are really good, and it's going to lead to a lot more work. But I mean, we've done some work over the past few years, excuse me, on criminal justice reform. I think that was helpful to start to deal with the issue of mass incarceration, but there is a whole lot to do. And if you go back to last summer and the protests after George Floyd's killing, we realize that there is this desire, not just people in Congress, but the people who went out on the streets to march, and people who were marching with me came from all walks of life, all different colors, all different faiths. In the middle of a pandemic, people are hungry to address these social justice and racial justice issues, and we could do it. But Harrison, if I may, just given what you do, if I could just turn the tables for a second. I mean, what happened inside of the role that NBA players overall played, but especially what happened inside the bubble right during the playoffs when Jacob Blake was well, I think it was right after Jacob Blake was shot, right? Um, and and what came out of that, and the way that so many players who were already totally focused on these issues um, then sort of pivoted and demanded more and required more, and suddenly heading into the elections, it was because of what happened there, and so many NBA players that that all of a sudden we're using arenas as voting places, which made a huge difference to get people involved. So it's teamwork that's required here. There's a lot of it, and I want to thank you because I know sometimes, I'm sorry, I know it's your interview, but I'm going to take advantage, Harrison, because I remember I remember when you got involved after Tatiana Jefferson was shot and killed, and you stepped up and I think paid for a funeral, if I remember, and raised money and really focused on the issue of police brutality then, and it took what we saw during the summer to really get everyone to pay as much attention as we all should have been paying for years now. But we need to build upon that, and we need to move forward and pass more legislation and keep people engaged and talking and fighting racism and addressing social justice.
I definitely appreciate that. And, as NBA players, a lot of us come from these communities where these things are happening. And because, we play on TV, we have, followings and things like that. We have a platform to speak on these things and to bring awareness to these things. But at least from the conversation that I've had, even before the bubble, even before George Floyd, and just, seeing all of these issues happen, it comes down to legislation. So my next question is, how do you think that Congress and NBA players can work together to get things passed? Like, how do we actually get something onto the floor and passed? And you can talk about that and how possible that is and what we can do.
Why don't I think it's totally possible. I think we the House. You mentioned I serve on the Judiciary Committee. We deal with we deal with lots of these issues all all the time, and my colleague and friend Karen Bass, who has been a champion of social justice issues for her entire career, she led the way, and we passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act in the House. And everyone knows you got to schoolhouse rock, right? You got to pass it in the House, you got to pass it in the Senate, and we got stuck. But in large part because of the efforts that helped change things. So now we have a majority in the Senate, not a big majority, it's 50-50. And thank God for Vice President Kamala Harris, who's the deciding vote. But that's enough. We can now move forward, and we can pass this legislation in the House and Senate, and we can finally look to a White House where there's a president who will sign it into law. And I think we're going to make a lot of progress. And I think, as I said, President Biden's already done a lot on his own, but you're right, we need to pass legislation, and we will. And the voices like yours are really, really important in making sure that everyone understands what's happening, that this is out there, that there's a bill that people need to pay attention to, and they need to call their senators and their representatives and tell them that they got to get behind this and pass it. That's how this stuff happens. And we got close last year, but now things are starting to line up so that we can actually do this and help save lives and help address systemic racism and help us move forward together as a country. And that's really, really important.
Well, I'm definitely gonna look forward to following up with you post this call about how we can figure out different collaborations and really move that forward, because I know that's something that is very important amongst NBA players, but just really in society. Seeing more of the issues that they're dealing with every single day addressed and put into law. I know you personally are a Jewish member of Congress and religious. How does your faith guide you?
Well, I don't get to talk about it a lot. Here's how it guides me. I feel, all of us who come from a place of faith, have it affects our worldview and who we are. And in my case, my faith, my Jewish faith, tells me that it is my obligation to make this place, this earth I live on, and the people that I interact with, to make it better and to strengthen the world, and to recognize that I have a responsibility to help lift up other people, and that ultimately, we all share this same place, and we all need to find ways to strengthen it together. And that's not, I mean, that's sort of informs what I do, and there from a Jewish perspective. But the idea is universal, or at least I hope it is, that we can recognize that we have this obligation to look out for one another. I've had this conversation with Christian colleagues of mine. I've had this conversation with Muslim colleagues of mine. I mean, the fact is there is this shared belief we have in working together to lift others up, and especially to help people who really need a hand up.
I know recently you've come under attack, for your faith. What does it say about the state of affairs in the States right now? How dangerous are white supremacy groups, and what is the credibility of their risk to minority groups?
Yeah, I got to tell you, Harrison, that the people who are busy going on social media attacking me because they don't like my religion, they're not big fans of yours either, because they don't like the color of your skin. And it is an unfortunate hatred is an unfortunate thing to throw people together, especially when you and I have so much in common that shouldn't fall to that. But the fact is, we have a unique responsibility to stand up to white supremacists, and those people, those white supremacists who marched into the Capitol, they were carrying Confederate flags, they were wearing anti-Semitic clothes, and when it says more about them, obviously, than it does about us, but it reminds us that when we come together, when all of the people that they hate stand up and really stand together to push back, because that's not who we are as a country, and they need to know that, we're all stronger as a result. So we'll get through this, but it's that going back, because I know we talked about it before, but January 6th is a reminder that that those white supremacists who are just so full of racism and anti-Semitism, and we'll stand up to them, and we have to stand up to them, because the America that we live in, the America that's given us opportunity, is an America that has respect for everybody, and where hatred doesn't belong, just doesn't belong.
And my last question is, what's the best way to combat them? Because there's so many different strategies that are thrown out there. Obviously, there's the emotional reaction that happens when you see something like that. In your eyes, and with your experience and intelligence, what have you come across as the best way to combat them?
Well, it's a really good question. So there are a lot of things that we can do. There are things that look, there are things the government has to do. So we have to make sure, for example, that Congress is providing the resources to the Department of Justice to monitor white supremacist groups, to have a strategy to deal with white supremacist groups, so that they don't wind up attacking the Capitol and threatening people, and killing people. And that's a piece of it. But at the same time that there's that official response, and by the way, there's legislation that we need to move forward on, to make sure that the hate crime laws that we have in place, that the information actually gets reported, and that we have data, so that it makes it easier for us to really go after the people who are doing this. But aside from that, I really think that if you go again, because we talked about all this a little bit, if you go back to the conversations that took place last summer, Harrison, where there were a lot of people talking straight up about things they didn't know about each other's communities, and the apologies that took place, the willingness, the desire to want to really engage with one another and advocate for one another. We can't let that be a one-off. We can't let that be something that we look back on and say, remember that after George Floyd was killed, that was so terrible, but at least people came together. That's not the point. The point is to come together and stand together until we make change together. And that's, I believe, the absolute best response to the white supremacists, to the racists, to the anti-Semites, to the people carrying those Confederate flags. That's what we do, that requires a lot of effort, and it's going to go on for a while. But we've got to continue with it and make sure that we're standing together and working together to make that change.
Absolutely. So you're involved with a number of committees. You're on the Judiciary Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, including the chairman of the committee that oversees the Middle East and terrorism. Obviously, a lot of classified information comes via that committee. How do you view the region, and what do we understand or not understand?
Well, it's a really interesting region. I think when people think about the Middle East, they think about oil, and then unfortunately they think about some of the countries, and they think about wars that we've been in. But there is a lot of the issues that we focus on around the world are front and center there. I think our foreign policy needs to focus on human rights, and our friends in the Gulf who have now come together, and countries like Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and others have super high-tech economies and advanced economies, and they're working together now. And there are lots of things that they're doing that America benefits from and that we can partner with them on. And so all of those things are happening in a region that I think most people don't pay that much attention to. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to try to provide a little bit of insight like that.
Congressman, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. I know I ran over, but I appreciate you being willing to stay on. And I definitely look forward to collaborating with you, moving on from here.
I look forward to it too, Harrison. Thanks so much for having me. And look, you've got, this, and you can choose to include this when you air this or not. But the fact is, you've got this really, you're an NBA star with a platform, and people listen to you, and the fact that people care about what you have to say and listen to you and look up to you, and I'm so grateful that this is one of the things that you're choosing to do. Although in the way that I've gotten to know you, it's consistent with who you are. But I'm really grateful for it. So I just wanted to say thanks.
No, I definitely appreciate that, man, and I appreciate people like yourself who are willing to not only teach but be available. You could have all these experiences, you could know everything that's been going on, but to be able to share with me and hopefully a lot of people in my demographic, that's huge.
Well, my pleasure. And let's definitely stay in touch. I think there's a lot of good stuff we can do together.
Sounds good, man.